No. Hi, Joel. How are you today?
I'm doing all right, and hopefully you can say the same.
Yes, I'm very well, thank you. And thanks for joining us today.
It is always my pleasure.
And today we're talking about your vitamin D. Can you tell us a little bit about your vitamin D?
Sure, we offer it in two different dose sizes. So we have an adult version and we have a child's version. The adult version is each dose, which is one drop, is 25 micrograms or 1,000 IU. And for children, it's one drop again is 400 IU or 10 micrograms. And the reason I give both numbers is depending on where you read and who you talk to, they'll
Mhm.
use one set and it just gets way too confusing between them. So I like to give both sets always.
Excellent. And can you tell us a little bit about the base that it's in?
Sure. Ours is done in an oil base. And the reason we do that is vitamin D is actually an oil based or a fat based vitamin. It's a vitamin that breaks kind of all the rules because it's technically a hormone vitamin, but we won't get into that today.
Okay.
but it is in an oil base naturally. It's a fat based one. So if you take it in an oil base, it actually gets better absorbed faster rather than taking it, for example, in a tablet or in a capsule or even water based. The preferable form is in an oil base. So what we do for ours is we use extra virgin olive oil, safflower oil, and sunflower oil. And the reason we pick those oils specifically are one, they're all non GMO,
Hmm.
no problems there. They're all done pesticide free, herbicide free. So they're very clean oils. On top of that, when you mix them together, they have virtually no taste. And I understand people are only taking one drop at a time, but still, if you get some other oils, they can go rancid easily, or they just change their flavor over time, and that kind of freaks people out. So this one is very simple. It's virtually taste free, and it's just one drop of just some nice food grade, clean, GMO free oils.
Okay. And is that different than some other brands on the market?
Definitely, most products on the market from a manufacturing standpoint of the raw material,
Hmm.
most manufacturers either use soy or corn oil, and the reason they do is you have to understand vitamin D at a manufacturer standpoint. And when I say manufacturer, I'm talking one step behind me. The
Okay.
the vitamin manufacturers who do this 10,000 liters at a time, 5,000 liters at a time, they normally will pick, sorry to say, the least expensive option and the one that's easiest to get. And on a worldwide market right now, and for the past several decades, the easiest two oils to get have been consistently corn and soy. They're easy, they're cheap, readily available, they're GMO normally. So, what we did is we actually contracted with a company, it took us several years to find them, out of New Jersey, of all places.
Hmm.
And we spec the oil specifically that they use to be only safflower sunflower. That's it. They don't use anything else, and that way we're assured that it's non-GMO because, luckily for us, those two oils don't exist GMO. They just
Mhm.
don't. There's not enough demand to make them GMO, which is a great thing for us. And then what we do is in house, we blend that down with a little more of the sunflower safflower. And again, we add extra virgin olive oil. That way it's nice and stable.
Fantastic. Um, and can I ask you, uh, can you ask you just a little bit about the role vitamin D plays for us?
Sure.
Yeah.
Vitamin D is a fascinating vitamin. First of all, as I was saying earlier, it's unique in that it's technically a hormone that's actually a vitamin. And
Mhm.
if you think about it, it's a vitamin we actually make ourselves if you're exposed to enough high intensity UV light every day, which is
Mm.
pretty different when you think about all the other vitamins out there. You can't make vitamin C, for example. You just can't. It's physically impossible. Um, Now, the thing is, in our bodies, vitamin D is really fundamental. And
Mhm.
it's fundamental for a couple of reasons. One is that it is required to have calcium function properly in our bodies. It
Okay.
is required. If you don't have vitamin D, you end up having something which, oh, such a joy, called rickets,
Oh,
whereby your bones basically fall apart. That's a very simple explanation, but
wow.
that's basically what happens.
Hmm.
And that's it's when researchers were looking, that's the primary reason they even found vitamin D, was in the search to prevent and cure rickets. And that was in the 1920s, I believe. Then, with more research going on for the decades since, they've discovered that vitamin D is also very important for several other things. One of which, very timely at this particular time, is our immune systems. And the second of which is actually muscle function. They
Hmm.
found that, and this isn't very well known, they found that if you have someone who has weak muscles and supplement them with vitamin D, the weaknesses will be reduced. They won't be eliminated, but they'll be reduced fairly dramatically if they're on a regular regimen of vitamin D. Now, when it comes to the immune system, we have found over the years that vitamin D supplementation in, improves your baseline status for your immune system. And what I mean by that is all of us have a baseline status, and that is where your immune system is and how well it's prepared to fight off invaders.
Hmm.
And there's multiple components to that. It's not just this one thing. There's multiple components. But what they have found is if you have enough vitamin D in you on a regular basis, that being today doesn't really matter, it's every day that matters, that you increase your baseline. So you're increasing your body's ability to fight off any type of invader, no one type specifically. Now, with the current research that's going on right now regarding COVID 19,
Hmm.
what they have found, and please understand, like all research around COVID 19, the results are preliminary. Let's start off just saying that so that we're got the cards on the table, we're open and we're honest.
Hmm.
The research is preliminary, but what they found is that people who have baseline levels of vitamin D in their bodies, the higher the amount of vitamin D, and of course, there are always limits when you say the higher the amount, but the higher the amount, the better the outcomes to patients who both have been exposed to COVID and those who've actually contracted COVID.
Wow.
Essentially, putting that whole big thing into one sentence, you're more likely to be healthier when exposed to, or if you've had COVID,
Hmm.
with higher levels of vitamin D.
Wow. That's amazing. I mean, we so need this vitamin now.
Oh,
Lack
we
of
needed it
sunlight
always.
and
Yeah.
immune. Yeah.
Well, the funny thing is, vitamin D is one of those things also that most North Americans, let alone Canadians, but most North Americans are blissfully unaware of their deficiency in. If you look, for example, there was a study done by Harvard University, and they found if you take the very, very, very bottom
Mhm.
level of recommendations of vitamin D in people's bodies. So, a level much lower than most experts say is the recommended level, and say, okay, there's our baseline. What percentage of the population is that or below? You're about half the population of the United States is below that number. Now, if you
Wow.
take that data and crank it up to our lovely climate up north and our latitude up north in the Great White North, the problem is that you look at a study, for example, that was done by McMaster, I think it was, where
Hmm.
they calculated based on the data from Harvard that something like 97 to 98% of all Canadians
Hmm.
are by definition deficient in
Wow.
vitamin D.
Amazing.
And the problem with that is that we just don't get enough sunlight intensely enough in the northern climate. And more importantly than that, when, for example, we do get it in those 2 months of the summer,
Mhm.
most of us aren't outside long enough to get it because we're afraid of skin cancer.
Yes. Yes, yes, that's true.
So we're damned if we do, damned if we don't, and damned on any other type of measure.
Can you tell us a bit about the So you said that one dose is 25 micrograms?
For an adult, one dose is 25 micrograms, which is 1,000 IU, which is one drop.
Okay, so 1,000 IU. So that's a recommended daily intake of it, or?
That is what Health Canada recommends.
Hmm.
If you talk to the experts out there, many people will say that it is the lower end of recommendations.
Hmm.
For example, there have been a lot of calls out there by experts to raise that fivefold.
Wow.
But, but, we still, as a manufacturer, I'm still bound by saying that Health Canada's recommendations are 1,000 IU or 25 micrograms for an adult.
Okay.
There are very strict rules placed on people such as myself by Health Canada as to what we can recommend dose wise.
Of course, of course. Um, could you tell us though, like a little bit about what would happen if someone did take too much?
Well, okay, that's a bit interesting because,
Mhm.
for example, you can take, and there are people who are prescribed 200,000 IU at a
Holy
shot.
moly.
Oh yeah. I know someone who's a relative of mine who actually is prescribed, I think it's about 450,000 IU.
Wow.
But the nice thing is your body can handle immensely high doses occasionally.
Okay.
Because it's fat soluble, what ends up happening is your body stores it and draws from it. However, if you take if for an extended period of time you take a high dose, it actually is very hard on your liver. And I can explain why because that kind of matters.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of confusion about vitamin D out in the marketplace because there's two main forms of vitamin D. You have vitamin D2 and vitamin D3.
Okay.
And vitamin D2 is the vegan form of vitamin D.
Mm-hmm.
It comes primarily from mushrooms. And then you have vitamin D3, which is the non vegan form, i.e., it comes from animal products. It either comes from liver oils, normally, if you ask your parents, grandparents, etc., they'll tell you about the joy of taking cod liver oil every
Oh,
night
yes.
and the taste and smell thereof.
Mhm.
Um, that was taken for its vitamin D content, or it comes from lanolin, which is a byproduct of um, wool sweat. Basically, it's basically created from the sweat of sheep, for
Yum.
lack of a better phrase. Um, you can't clean it up. That's what it's from.
Wow.
I can't say it much better than that. But part of the confusion is that our body doesn't actually use either of those forms as they are.
Okay.
Both of those forms have to be converted into what's called 25 hydroxy vitamin D because that's the biologically active form our body needs.
Okay.
And part of the confusion out there is that a very prominent person in our industry came out probably about 5 years ago and said, "You got to take vitamin D3. Vitamin D2 is crap." And
Mm.
he gave a long explanation why, and absolutely no science behind it. He just gave a very long explanation. So
Okay.
that pushed other people to start looking into it and saying, "Okay, do we? Don't we? Do we? Don't we? Do we? Don't we?" And the problem is a lot of people only read that very first thing and didn't read much more. The science has come in now, and what they found is that it's virtually a wash. Whether you take vitamin D2 or vitamin D3, it still gets converted at almost the exact same rate into 25 hydroxy vitamin D by your liver. The only time where that's not true is if someone has liver issues. And
Uh,
if you have liver issues, it's not a given that one is going to work and the other isn't, or even if it is, it's not a given as to which one is going to work better.
hmm. And so, yours is vegan, is it?
We offer both vegan and vegetarian,
Okay.
and but the ones that your listeners are going to see is going to be the vegan one. Yes,
Okay. So that's made from mushrooms then.
correct.
Okay.
A-
Excellent.
And the interesting thing, we prefer the vegan one,
Hmm.
and I say we when I say, for example, if my camera was working right now, you'd see I have two bottles sitting on my table in front of me. My wife and I take the adult vegan one, and my son takes the kids vegan one every day. And the reason is that virtually all of the safety studies on vitamin D's have
Mhm.
almost all, and when I say almost all, I think I was able to find one versus several hundred that wasn't, were done on vitamin D2, both
Okay.
short term and long term, high dose, low dose. Virtually all the studies were done on vitamin D2. And also, if you look at what doctors prescribe, if
Mhm.
you have a severe deficiency and a doctor has to actually prescribe vitamin D, it's always D2. It's
Hmm.
never D3.
Actually, can you tell us a little bit about the deficiency symptoms?
Um, the main way you'll find it
Mhm.
is if you are deficient in vitamin D, that's part of the problem is you won't feel it.
Okay.
It's not one of those ones where, like, if you're deficient in iron, for example, after a
Yeah.
while you'll feel lethargy. But in with vitamin D, you don't actually feel it
Mhm.
until it's way too late, and it actually manifests itself in bone issues, teeth issues, etc. But what you can do,
Mhm.
and I suggest this, and most experts also suggest this with any vitamin, if you think that you are deficient as opposed to just borderline,
Mhm.
have it as part of your regular testing. I go to my doctor every year, and I get a lovely, feels like it's Dracula coming and taking blood from me. But we get tested, and that way I know for certain if there are any issues. Now, with vitamin D, I've never been tested as being truly deficient in it, doing air
Mhm.
quotes here. But at the same time, I know that my body's chewing through a certain amount every day just because that's biological processes. So I personally take 5 drops a day, which works out to 5,000 IU.
Excellent. Are there
And I
any
do that winter, summer, spring, fall. That is a daily occurrence for me. I'm not one of those people who just does it in the depths of winter.
Okay, and so, um, yeah, that's interesting actually. Um, yeah, definitely taking blood tests to get your levels. Best way to figure that out. But can I ask you, are there any cautions with vitamin D or this particular type of vitamin D?
The only big caution is don't go haywire. And I know that may sound really odd, but the thing is, you can't be allergic to vitamin D. It's not physically possible because you wouldn't have survived to hear this if you
Mhm.
were allergic to vitamin D.
Right.
Um, we use non GMO source materials, so you don't have to worry about GMOs being an issue. Obviously, if you're allergic to one of the components, be it safflower, sunflower, or olive, please stay away from the product. You're not going to enjoy the experience, but
Okay.
those are rare.
Yeah.
Um, but when I say don't go crazy, is even in times like this, consumers tend sometimes to think, okay, if a little is good for me, a lot is going to be amazing for me. Fat soluble vitamins, that's not the case. Don't go overboard because if you go, say you go nuts and decide to have 25 drops a day,
Hmm.
after a while, your liver's not going to be very happy with you. It's
Yeah.
not. That's going overboard. Um, if you go one drop, 2 drops, 3 drops, 4 drops, 5 drops, that's still in the realm of not an issue.
Hmm.
But uh, I know some people recommend going 10,000 IU a day. I'll
Hmm.
be honest, I think that's too much.
Yeah.
Unless a doctor tells you it, I think that's too much.
Yeah, I mean, and that's what I was thinking. And particularly in this time, people think the more the better. So,
Yeah,
Mhm.
I caution against that greatly
Yeah.
with anything that's a fat soluble vitamin. If you're talking something that's a water soluble vitamin, something like vitamin C that you're going to urinate out if you take too much, fill your boots.
Mhm.
Worst comes to worst, you have really really expensive toilet water.
Yes.
But with vitamin D, because your body stores it and draws from it, taking a reasonable amount a day, no problem, is nice and healthy.
Hmm.
Going overboard, unless your doctor tells you to after a blood test, not just over a phone call. If a doctor after a blood test says, you're chronically low, you need to take it, let's monitor this every 3 months, take this much a day. Okay, fine, no problem.
Good, good advice there. Can you tell us, or is there anything else you'd like to tell us about your particular vitamin D?
The only big thing about it is that our product, as I said, non-GMO, it's kosher, it's vegan. We tried to produce a product that it was pure and easy as possible.
Hmm.
We really went for that before we launched this product. We spent some time on it, and that's one of the reasons we went with an oil form as opposed to a capsule, a tablet, or any other form. We wanted to make it so that it was effective and at the same time easy to take and clean. We tried to avoid anything with any preservatives of any kind. And I do want to caution people. I've seen other products out there
Hmm.
that, for lack of a better phrase, they want to get fancy. There's some out there that have flavors. They have they're water based as opposed to oil based. They've
Yeah,
got glycerin in them, and they've got preservatives. And it's like, why would you go fancy and complex when you can go simple and it works better?
yeah,
I don't understand that, but I caution people against that.
yeah.
Simple works.
The simpler the better, I think. Yeah, absolutely. And so where can people out there find your vitamin D?
Our vitamin D, we're available at virtually all health food stores. We're also available at Loblaws branded stores, which are Fortino's, Loblaws, Real Canadian Superstore, Zehrs, the Real Atlantic Superstore. I'm trying to remember them all. There's tons of them. Um, and we're also available at our own website, which is pur-lenatural.com. Um, and on top of that, we're also one of the best sellers on Amazon.
Fantastic.
Yeah, we're very fortunate. People try the product and tend to really like it.
Yeah, yeah, no, your products are great.
So thank
Um,
you.
yes, of course. And I just thank you so much for coming to speak with us today about this product. And it sounds fantastic. I will definitely have to try this. I'm sure I'm
Thank you.
very deficient.
Great. I look not great that you're deficient. Great that you're going to try it. That came out really badly. Great that you're going to try it. I look forward to hearing your commentary on it as well as everyone else's commentary. We love hearing feedback. Please, the more the better.
Excellent. Definitely you will. Thank you so much again, Joel, for taking the time out of your busy schedule to join us today.
Thank you very much. It's always fun and it is always a pleasure.